السادة المتحدثين وأهلا وسهلا بكم في المحور الثالث من جلستنا الثالثة والأخير
We thank you,
والتي تحمل عنوان الاستثمار.
and we're about to start the last session, which is regarding,
نرحب بالدكتورة علا عوض
we're welcoming Dr. Ola Awad,
التي ستقود هذه الجلسة
who's going to lead this session
وتقترح حلول عملية
and direct us towards solutions to help us adapt to the climate change and ability to face environmental challenges. We also welcome Dr.
سيقدم الورق
Murrar, who's going to present a paper on this important topic.
أستاذ مشارك في دراسة النزاح الوطنية. وأيضا نرحب بالدكتور جيفري ساكس.
Also, we welcome with Dr. Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University,
الذي سيقدم
who's a professor and president of the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network and director of Center of Sustainable Development at Columbia University. And we hope that we would come up with tangible solutions that would help us have a sustainable future. Now we give the floor to Her Excellency Dr. Ola Awad, and we hope that this would enrich your knowledge. Thank you. Best of health to everyone, and thank you for your patience. I know that it's been a long day for you, but Dr. Rabih and I and Professor Sachs promise you that we won't take much more of your time. This session is on investment, and Dr. Rabih Murad is going to present his presentation on investment in a green infrastructure and how to adapt with the climate in Palestine. And Professor Jeffrey Sachs is going to handle the discussion. In order not to take much more of your time, we're going to welcome Dr. Rabih on your behalf. The floor is yours. The third session is about opportunities for sustainable development in the medium term, and it's very hard to cover this topic in such a short period, but we're going to try our best when we're talking about green infrastructure, and it's cross-cutting with various sectors such as agriculture, energy, infrastructure, and even the governmental and public procurement. So there are lots of sectors that are cross-cutting with this. It's quite a large topic, so I'm going to try to cover it in reference to the Palestinian context and the efforts made at the public level or at even the private sector over the few years. I tried to take the structure of this workshop where we're discussing the pre-war, during war, and post-war, and the recommendations that would help induce the investments, green investments in Palestine. Of course, in accordance to the local governance statistics, we have a big issue relevant to productivity and consuming. We have large amounts of waste in Palestine. We have about 1.7 tons of solid waste and 1 kilogram per person. And some of them are organic waste, and some have CO2 emissions. We have about 6,483,000 tons of CO2. And in accordance to implementing the Sustainable Development Agenda of 2030, can you remove this black glitch on the screen, please? The unsustainable use creates lots of environmental, social, and economic problems, which we're going to try to highlight during this research paper. Of course, this paper tries to find green solutions and to be able to assess the war on Gaza, the impact of the war in Gaza on sustainable environments, sustainability, and how it's linked to water contamination and the the recommendations losing
الموضوع
time
راهن
for
في قطاع
technical
غزة.
issues.
يعني
In
آخر
terms of the
بيانات
current
الاتحاد
situation in
الأوروبي
the Gaza Strip, according
المنظمة
to the
الصحة
EU
العالمية،
statistics, the
وأيضا
WHO statistics,
بيانات
as well
الوفود
as the World Bank,
المنظم، وأيضا البيانات المحلية اللي هي من
and
وحدات
even local
المركز
statistics from
للإحصاء
the
القومي.
Palestinian Central Bureau of
ففي عندنا
Statistics.
محطات معالجة المياه.
We have the water treatment
آه، التدمير
stations
اللي صار فيها بسبب الحرب أدى
have
إلى
been destructed,
تصريف
and that
130
has
ألف متر مكعب يوميا من المياه غير
resulted in the
المعالجة
loss
إلى
of
البحر. في عندنا
130,000
حوالي 270 ألف طن من
cubic
المخلفات في
meters
قطاع غزة
of
يجري
untreated
إلى
water
المياه
into
الأخرى
the sea. Now we
بحرية،
have over
سواء بين السكان في مختلف
270,000 tons
مناطق
of solid
غزة،
waste in
لئلا
the Gaza Strip, and
انتشار
that has
الوباء
caused
والأمراض
the infestation of
والإصابات
various
بالجهاز التنفسي. تم الإبلاغ عن العديد من حالات
infections,
الأخطار
especially respiratory
النتاج،
infections.
وعن أكثر من
And
600 ألف
also,
حالة من
there are
التهاب
more than
الجهاز التنفسي.
600,000
حتى
cases
سبتمبر
of
الحالي تم
respiratory
تدمير أكثر
infections.
من
Up until now,
163 ألف كناية، ما بين تدمير
163,000
كلي
have
وجزئي
been
أدى
either
إلى
fully or
حوالي
partially
39
destructed.
مليون طن من
As a
الطعام
result,
الملوث
there's
بمواد
39 million
خطرة.
tons of
57% من
um,
الأراضي الزراعية، وهي
rubble,
تعتبر
which
يعني
is
جزء
contaminated
كبير
with this
تحصل
dangerous
مصر،
material such
تم
as asbestos and
تدميرها سواء
also 67 over
بالبساتين أو
67% of
بالمحاصيل أو
agricultural
الحشائش.
lands have been
فأدى إلى
negatively affected,
النظام البيئي
and
في
the whole
منطقة
eco
الواجهة وأثر
system in
سلبي على
Gaza has
محافظة
been
الأمن الغذائي التي تمت
impacted.
قبلها سابقا، وأيضا على التوازن البيئي.
Also, this has
وكمان يعني
affected
تحدي
the
كبير مرتبط أيضا
environmental
بتدمير
balance,
وتم
and
تدمير
in
120 موقع
addition to
تاريخي في
120
قطاع غزة أو تراثي
UNESCO
حسب تقديرات
have
يونسكو عبر
according to
المجتمع
UNESCO, there are
الأحمر
over
الدولي.
120 sites which have been
طيب في
fully
الضفة الغربية
destructed,
أيضا، احنا ما حكيناش عن
and
الضفة
they're part
الغربية،
of
ولكن
the.
الضفة الغربية أيضا تعرضت ل يعني تحديات
As for the
كبيرة
West Bank,
بيئية،
there are lots
خاصة
of
تدمير البنية
challenges,
التحتية في
especially the infrastructure, destruction of
مناطق
the infrastructure
المخيمات في
in
مناطق
the
التمهيدية،
refugee camps in the northern
الاضطراب
parts of
كمان
the West Bank.
يعني
Also,
التوسع الاستيطاني اللي
the
قاعدين نشوفنا
expansion of
بعيننا اليوم.
settlements that we're
وإحنا
witnessing
نظن
on
أيام
daily
القدس
basis. If we
رسمنا
were to
غرب القدس
discuss
في جبل
the
كامل، يعني
villages
بعد
on
سقطت نظام
the
كامل
western
بتدمير
part
الحي
of
كامل،
uh,
كأن غاد أراضي للزيتون،
southwestern part
وأيضا
of
تعتبر منطقة يعني قريبة
Jerusalem,
من الأراضي
it's
الزراعية في
planted
منطقة
with
قدس
olive
شمال غرب
trees, and
القدس.
we can see this
فبرضه
in the
تحديات للضفة
northern
الغربية بالإضافة لتحديات
part of
السابقة
Jerusalem,
كما
northern western part
تضاعفت
of
بعد
Jerusalem,
الحرب على
and
قطاع
they have
غزة.
been negatively
فشو
affected.
احنا التحديات
Also,
الرئيسية
the main
للاستثمار في
challenges
البنية
that we have
التحتية
for
الخضراء؟
investment in the
طبعا
green
الاحتلال
infrastructure,
الإسرائيلي يعتبر
of course,
تحدي
number one
رئيسي
is
من
the main
خلال
challenge
القيود
is the
المفروضة
Israeli
على
occupation due to the
العمل في
restrictions and policies and
المناطق
practices that
التي
they
يتعرضوا
conduct in Area
للمقاومة
C.
السابقة.
And my
وكمان
colleagues have mentioned that in the
مشاريع
previous
الطاقة
research
المتجددة،
papers. In
والتي
addition
شفنا
to
العديد من مشاريع الطاقة
renewable energy,
المتجددة
we
في
know
منطقة
that there are
الأسوار
lots
تم
of
تدميرها
renewable
بمنطقة
energy
مسافر يطا.
projects have
كمان
been
القيود المفروضة
destructed
أنشئت
in
إلى
Masafer
المناطق
Yatta in the south
القريبة
of Palestine,
من
as well as in Jericho, the
محطات الطاقة
Jordanian Valley.
في منطقة
There's
الأدوار
also
ل
in the Jordanian Valley
الإضافة
area
للتأمين
near
الصحي
Jericho, the high
الفلسطيني. حين
voltage
إشكالية
co
متعلقة في ضعف السياسات العائلة
companies
الحكومية.
have been
هذه
also
نقطة رئيسية
destructed, or
بالجهاز
their energy has
التنفسي
been destructed.
اللي كانت بصراحة
Basically,
الوقت المتاح لها يعني
due
محدود.
to the time
ولكن
restriction we
كمان
had
احنا
for
في
this
عندنا
research
العديد
paper,
من
I
المبادرات
realized
في
that there's
الحرب على
lots of
قطاع غزة.
initiatives
بالعكس احنا بلشنا
relevant to this.
يعني
We have
بجزء من
started maybe since
2013 كان في عندنا مبادرات
2013,
حتى قبل
whereas there were some
2008
initiatives,
كان
and
الحديث
even
عن الاقتصاد
prior to
الأخضر.
that, maybe
ما حتى
2008, talking
أنهينا
about
دراسة أو دراستين.
green economy. In
ولكن
mass, we've
موضوع
conducted one or
الاقتصاد
two
الأخضر في
studies on this.
فلسطين
However,
وموضوع
green economy in Palestine,
بعيدا عن موضوع
and
الاستدامة
away from
كمصطلح،
sustainability
هو
as a
غير
term or a
مباشر.
concept,
يعني في
it's not
عنا بنحكي
institutionalized. It's
مبادرات
not part
كذا
of
وهناك، ولكن ما
our
في عنا فعلا
built-in
خطة
system. So
واضحة
we don't have a
لتنفيذ
clear
الاقتصاد
system
الأخضر.
on
في عنا
how
خطوات
to
قانونية
start with
كثيرة،
green
يعني مرة
infrastructure. We have lots of
على قانون
loopholes
المشتريات
in terms
العامة
of the legal
ملموس
aspects
جدا
there. The legal
يتعلق إلى
framework
الاستدامة أو
has a
يعني
loophole in
موضوع
terms of
الاستدامة وموضوع
sustainability and
المشتريات الخضراء. يعني
procurement
ولكن
for
بشكل
green
غير مباشر،
uh,
ولا في عنا أي
energy.
حوافز
However,
أو أي
we do not have
إجراءات
any
حسب القانون
incentives or
الاشتراكي.
any
وبنعرف
procedures in
حجم
terms of the
الاشتراك
procurement
العالمي
law. We know
ضخم
that
جدا،
the
وهي من
public
السياسات
procurement is quite
الأبرز اللي ممكن
has
تساهم
the
في
lion's
تعزيز
share,
الاقتصاد الأخضر في
and
فلسطين.
that
موضوع
would
الطاقة
support the
المتجددة
green
كمان
energy. Also,
مستهدفة
renewable
دعم في
energy.
الدراسات
We
الجاية
worked at
لحلول
Mass on
فجوة
several research studies, and
قانونية
there were
جديدة.
such
فإن مبادرات
lots of
كمان فيها
loopholes as
وزارة
well. There were some initiatives
الاقتصاد
conducted by
كمان
the
مثل
Ministry of
خطة
Economy on
بناء
green
وتكثيف
economy.
سلطة
We
البيئة
also
كانت تحت
have the
المبادرة. ولكن كل
Environment
المبادرات
Authority
الدولية
also
لم
have worked
تنتهي
on that, but they were
بعمل واضح
silos
بما
initiatives,
هي
and they didn't end
الخطة.
up with a clear definition of
فلهيك
what is
يعني
green economy in
موضوع السياسات
Palestine.
العامة
So the
للتغير
overall
والتحديات
policies and public
الأساسية.
policies and
البنية
funding is
التحتية
a
لقطاع
second challenge. The third is
نقل
the
الكهرباء واللي هو
infrastructure
من
and
الإشكاليات
transportation
الأساسية
of
التي اليوم يعني بتواجه
electricity
قطاع
or
الطاقة
transfer of
المتكاملة في
electricity,
فلسطين،
where
وهي
it's
كيفية
a
نقل
major
الكهرباء
problem how to
المتولدة من
transfer
خلال أو
electricity
الطاقة
that's
الشمسية. في
produced by
عنا
solar
بعض
energy.
السياسات المتعلقة
There are lots of
بالتحول
policies
للوسائل
relevant
الكهربائية في
to
فلسطين، وبرضه
using
يعني
electric
هاي مهم
vehicles or
إنها
hybrid
ممكن إنها
vehicles in the
تأثر
future,
على
and that could
استدامة
also
البيئة،
affect the
وهي من مكونات الاقتصاد
environmental
الأخضر.
sustainability,
وكمان
and it's one of
نسبة
the main
التلوث
components
وكمان
of green
الضوضاء
um,
والأزمة اللي بتخلقها
environment, and it
السيارات،
creates, of
واللي
course,
هي بنشوفها
the
أو زاد
traffic
عددها
in
بشكل كبير
addition to
جدا، خاصة
pollution,
السيارات الخاصة.
especially
فهي
the
مرة
private
بحاجة
cars
لبنية
increased
تحتية
lately. So
خاصة
this requires an
بالوسيلات
infrastructure
الكهربائية.
relevant to
وعندنا
electrical vehicles.
حكيت عن سياسات الشراء
Also
المستدام.
talked
في
about
اتفاقيات دولية كانت معنا
procurement,
تفاجأت
and we
عندما
also have
فعلا في بعض
international
الدول
lessons
زي
learned. There are lots of
افغانستان، سوريا،
uh,
العراق،
such as
كان
Afghanistan,
فيها
Syria,
امثله
Iraq.
على
They
كيفيه
had lots of
استخدام
examples on
البنيه
how to use
التحتيه الخضراء،
infrastructure,
خاصه
green
في الدول اللي كان
infrastructure,
فيها
especially in countries
significant
that
conflict،
had
كيف تبنوا
conflict, and how
سياسات
they were
على
able to
الاعماق
endorse the
خاصه في
reconstruction
يعني
policy, a green
العراق.
reconstruction policy, such as Iraq.
طيب هلا نيجي للاولويات، يعني مش نطول
As
عليكم.
for the priorities, I'm not going to
قطاع
take much
غزه
more of your time. In the Gaza Strip,
من المهم جدا
it's
أن
very
يكون
important
هناك رؤية شاملة
to
لإعادة الإعمار الأخضر.
have
وإحنا بنيجي
uh,
بنحكي عن قطاع غزة
a
وإعادة
whole
الإعمار الأخضر،
vision
ولكن
for
يعني
green reconstruction.
لاحظنا أن من بدء
And
الحرب لليوم
we
الحين
noticed
كثير من
that since the
الممارسات في قطاع
war,
غزة
there's
هي
lots of
ممارسات
practices
خطر،
in the
لما
Gaza Strip,
يتم
which
إعادة
are green
تدمير
practices, where
كافة
they
منتجات قطاع
recycle
غزة.
all the products
استخدام
in Gaza. They reuse all the products
الماء
that
اللي
they
يوجد
have,
في
such as
الأرض من
use of water
خلينا نحكي احنا بالعاميه اللي هو الحطب والى اخره،
and
واللي
use
يتم
of
استخدامها
everything, such
في
as use of
الوقود.
wood
فصار
to
استخدام
create
كبير
fuel.
او
So there's
على
lots of
المصادر الطاقه اللي هي البديله
use
ومصادر
of
الطاقه
alternative
المستدامه
energy
في
sources or
قطاع غزه،
sustainable energy
وتقنيات الهجره
sources in
الصحي
Gaza,
مثل
and recycling.
مثال قطع
I
النفايات
believe that
المشعلله هو من
improvising due
الامثل
to the
اللي
need
المفروض
was
يكون
the
موجود
main
في اي مجتمع.
solution. This should
ولكن
not
في
be
عندنا
the case,
ممارسات
but due
بيئيه،
to
ولكن انا
the
بوصي
environmental
في رؤيه
practices, due to
شامله
what they had to
لاعاده
do, they
الاعمار
had no
الخضر من
other
خلال تبني
choice.
استراتيجيه
So
تركز على
there
الاستدامه
should be a
البيئيه،
strategy
سواء
that focuses
في
on
مكافحه
environmental
النفايات والمياه،
sustainability, whether in
استفاده
managing
المقارير،
waste and
تعزيز الموارد
water, and
المستدامه
also
لتحقيق بيئه
promoting
صحيه ومستدامه
sustainable
للاجيال
agriculture in
القادمه.
order to have a future for the
استخدام
future
الطاقه الشمسيه،
generations. Also,
بما ان
use of solar
الجيش
energy,
جزء
since
كبير جدا من
a large
الاستثمار
portion, unfortunately, a
المالي
large
في حرب
portion of
غزه
the
في قطاع
infrastructure
غزه.
have been
فاحنا
destructed during
نموذج
this
المدن الريفيه
collective
والمدن
genocide
المستدامه
in
والمدن
Gaza.
المستدامه،
So
واللي
there's
ما في فرصه مرات بعد ما تعيد او بعد ما
sustainable
تبني
energy,
المدن انك
because
ترجع
unfortunately after you
تصلحها من
build the
الاول.
city, it's
ولكن
very hard for
هاي
you to
فرصه في قطاع
reconstruct
غزه
it
في
all over.
عمليه
But this
اعاده
is a
الاعمار، تبني
chance in
سياسات
Gaza, when we work on reconstruction,
مستدامه.
to actually have a
وايضا في ظل
sustainable
اصطدام
plan and to find a
لاعتماد على
sustainable
الطاقه
solution to be able to
الكهربائيه
depend on solar
المولده من
energy,
خلال
which is
السولار
generated by
وتخفيض
solar.
فواتير الطاقه. إعادة
And
الإعمار هي فرصة
the reconstruction
لتحديد
is also
مبادئ
an
الاقتصاد
opportunity
الأخضر
to
باستخدام
implement
مواد
green
وتقنيات صديقة
economy,
للبيئة،
and
تقلل
to
التأثيرات
use
السلبية على
tools
البيئة،
and
وتوفر بيئة
that would
مستدامة بما يشمل
create a
استخدام
sustainable
المواد
environment,
والتقنيات
including
صديقة
using the
للبيئة
technologies
لمنع
and
معدل
tools that
الحرائق
are
وإعادة تدوير المياه
eco-friendly,
والنفايات.
and to
كمان
work on water
تعزيز
treatment.
تشجير وإنشاء الأسطح الخضراء
Also,
لتحسين جودة الهواء، خاصة
creating
جزء كبير اليوم
green rooftops, because
نسبة
as we know,
المواد
the
السامة
large
في
percentage
التربة وفي
of
الهواء في قطاع
toxins
غزة
in the
يعني عالية جدا.
in the soil and also
فيما
in
يتعلق
the air
بالضفة
is highly
الغربية،
polluted.
تحديث التشريعات
Also on the
وإعادة
West Bank,
الترخيص لتشجيع الاستثمار
working
بمشروعات
on
الطاقة
registration
المتجددة، بما في
policies
ذلك
to
تخصيص الأراضي الخاصة
promote
والأراضي
investment,
الحكومية
such
لبناء
as
محطات
private
طاقة
lands, public
شمسية،
lands,
مع
to
تقديم أيضا
build
ضمان
solar
مصري طويلة
plants,
الأجل للمستفيدين.
and to
وهي كمان
provide
تحديات كبيرة
long-term
لبناية الاحتمال
loans. So
الطاقة
this is something
المتجددة.
that the renewable
تبني سياسات
energy
دعم الشراء
sector
المستدام.
has
أنا
been
برأيي
facing as
المشتريات العامة
threats
هي فرصة كبيرة جدا
and challenges.
لتعزيز
Also,
الاقتصاد
public
الأخضر
procurement
والشراء
is
المستدام.
quite the
ونحن بنحكي عن
opportunity to
مليارات
use for
الشواكل يتم
sustainability, because we're talking
يعني
about
إنفاقها
billions
سنويا
of shekels which are
في
being
الشراء
spent on
العام.
annual
والحكومة
basis for
أصلا
public
بحد تقدر
procurement, and the
يفرض
government
ظروفها على
is the
المشتريات
most
العامة من خلال
able
تبني
to
سياسات
impose
قرضاء.
its own policies by
ثالثا
imposing green policies.
تشجيع القطاع الخاص على تبني ممارسات الإنتاج الأخضر
Also,
وتعزيز التعاون مع الجامعات
promoting
والجهات الأخرى ذات العلاقة.
cooperation between universities and various other cost-cutting sectors. Electric vehicles en masse, we've conducted a study on that. So it's true that the customs is cheaper than it is for regular vehicles. However, in terms of infrastructure and at the high cost of charging units for these vehicles deteriorate from using it. And the lack of infrastructure, most of the buildings are not equipped for charging the electrical vehicles. Also, we have the sustainable public transportation, which is one of the most policies in China. 70% of their transportation is dependent on electrical buses. This is an opportunity for the Ministry of Transportation in Palestine and the government to create a policy to support that through endorsing this, whereas the transportation would be based on buses rather than using 4 to 7 passenger cars. So we can receive, let's say, VAT exemptions or maybe direct support to purchase public transportation buses. And that would create quite an opportunity, because one of the main challenges preventing the government from having a role in the public transportation is that it's unable to meet the financial needs to purchase the buses, the public buses, and being dependent on imports, and also working on food security and food diversity in terms of agriculture, which would also be reflected on this economical sustainability. Thank you so much, and I hope that it didn't take much more of your time. Thank you so much, and best of health, Dr. Rabbit, for this significant research paper regarding the challenges that we're facing. Not only does it fit into the international priorities in facing the climate change, but it has now become a priority for us in Palestine. Now I'll give the floor to welcome Professor Jeffrey Sachs.
And to save time,
Greetings.
We'll give you the floor. The floor is yours.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for including me in these discussions. Let me focus on what I regard as the main issue. The main issue is to build a basic state structure for Palestine, to build the economic framework for a sovereign state of Palestine, and to think about precisely what those tasks are in the next 5 years. I expect there to be a sovereign state of Palestine in the coming year. I'll be very optimistic. We are one veto away. The matter is for the regional powers of the Middle East to explain to President Trump and to the US government that the entire world believes in there being two states side by side on the borders of the 4th of June, 1967, and that the US is the only obstacle to that. The US vetoed Palestine's membership in the UN General Assembly, and it vetoed it through the vote in the UN Security Council. And I regard the first task of state building for Palestine to be admitted to the UN as the 194th UN member state. And this means basically ending the US veto. A recent vote in the UN General Assembly had 170 countries expressing support for a state of Palestine in the two-state solution, and basically the US is the only practical barrier to this. Now, all the rest of my remarks are presuming that we can overcome that barrier. Then come the question of actually a functional state. I regard a functional state of Palestine as being completely separate from Israel in all regards. So I view the strategic issue for Palestine as separation from Israel. maybe someday there can be normal, good relations of neighbors, as should be true. But Israel should have nothing to do with the collection of taxes, with the payments, with currency, with banking, with trade, with international transactions. Otherwise, Palestine just remains at most a rump vassal of the United States and Israel in that way. And so I think that the strategy needs to be to create a political entity with a viable state structure that is completely independent of Israel in all essential state matters. There is one issue that I would be grateful to hear thoughts on. It is essential that the West Bank have normal transport linkage with Gaza and with the Mediterranean coast. And this is a sine qua non of a viable state. There can be no viable state of the West Bank by itself. There certainly cannot be a viable Gaza by itself, nor can the entities of the Golan, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza be physically separated from each other in a viable state. So the next point, the first point is borders, that the state of Palestine has control over its borders. The second is contiguity of transport, whether that's a corridor, whether it is a land swap, how it is to be brought about is a central question for the UN Security Council, it seems to me, and needs to be recognized as absolutely crucial. A third point about state building is the role of Palestinian expats, because the Palestinian diaspora is very large and it's extremely talented, and it is filled with professionals and professionals that have bank balances and ability to fund startup businesses, housing, and other activities. I hope that there would be a basic statehood for all of the expats automatically, but I think that this also needs to be understood. A lot of Palestinian expats, because of the history of the last 75 years, will have lives of in which they're living part-time in the Gulf, or part-time in the United States, or part-time in Europe, and part-time in Palestine. And the state strategy should facilitate that kind of life in a routine way. The next on my list is everything about finance, which is really the hard work of the next 2 or 3 years. There needs to be a national budget. There needs to be tax revenues. There needs to be a national money supply, and there needs to be banking. And all of these open up many strategic considerations, especially because of the grip of the US on international banking. I think care should be taken that the Palestinian state is not completely vulnerable and subservient to US financial sanctions in its banking and its monetary sector. There are many delicate issues to discuss, but I think setting up a true independent fiscal policy and a true national currency and a true banking sector that is completely independent of Israeli banks and that is not solely reliant on SWIFT and the US banking system, I believe to be very important. The next item on my list is the ports and the airports. Clearly, Palestine cannot rely on Tel Aviv as the international airport, nor on Israeli ports. So there needs to be port services that are independent. There need to be air corridors. There needs to be access to Jordan's airports, as well as an airport for Palestine. And how to do that, I don't know, but it's also extremely important. There need to be trade linkages, transport linkages of course, Gaza with Egypt and of the West Bank and East Jerusalem with Jordan, and more broadly, transport linkages with the Middle East. The provision of basic infrastructure will be, for the next 10 years, probably the most central task of government. Ensuring access to safe water and sewerage, to power, to digital access, to public transport, to housing, and to waste management is a large investment program. Of course, Israel has destroyed much or all of this in Gaza and has undermined or destroyed it in the West Bank as well. But that is the public investment side, and creating public institutions that can finance this infrastructure and linking these institutions with basically Middle East financing, whether it's the capital markets in the Gulf, or whether it's the Islamic Development Bank or other modes of finance, will be the essence of the public investment strategy. Of course, there needs to be a public service strategy as well. Education and public health are the two most important services that need attending. So all of this state building is at least a 5 to 10 year effort as the highest priority. Both tactically and strategically, understanding how this will work in relations with Israel, with the EU, with the United States, with the Arab states, and with the BRICS is fundamental. My own view is that Palestine should not aim to piggyback on or leverage or even assume connections with Israeli institutions. I don't believe that there can be the trust or the security to do that. As many of you know, I am a great skeptic of American foreign policy, and so I don't put much hope and faith in American foreign policy in this regard. I think it has done profound damage to the Middle East since 1945, and it carried on the wonderful tradition of Britain, which destroyed the Middle East before that. So I don't think that this should be seen as primarily the World Bank or the US government or USAID and so forth as being the main agents of reconstruction. To my mind, the Arab neighbors are the most important by far. This is an Arab League problem, it seems to me, beyond anything else. And the main institution for finance is the Islamic Development Bank, which I think needs to be much larger in general, but should play a consequential institutional role. I'm also personally a big fan of the BRICS because I think that the BRICS have a major role to play. Egypt is now a member of the BRICS. The UAE is a member of the BRICS. Iran is a member of the BRICS. And I would hope that the state of Palestine becomes a partner of the BRICS sooner rather than later. So this is the main point that I wanted to emphasize. It's fine to talk about long-term growth and green and everything else, but the fact of the matter is the primary activity right now is basic state building after 75 years of wars, genocide, displacement, and after 100 years of manipulation by the Western countries, and it's time to build a real sovereign and secure state of Palestine. So I'll stop there, turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Jeffrey, and we value.
Oh, I don't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Oh, there, good.
Okay. So thank you so much for your
Nope.
intervention.
Thank you so much for your intervention, and we value your presence with us today.
And I want to open the floor.
I'll open the floor now for questions.
Okay.
Hi, this is Raja Khalidi, the director of MAS. I wanted to say thank you very much for your focus on state building. The reason I say that is especially is because we've had a lot of discussions today about many things, but one thing I didn't have a chance to mention is that we've just completed 4 studies which are based on the sort of vision that you were the sort of principles that you were trying to enunciate as the pillars, the economic pillars, if you wish, of sovereignty, and they might, you listed a number of things that we all have been talking about for many years and demanding, right? And so bringing them up again today, I think, is coherent with some of the more positive work we've been doing, and which I'd like to invite you, and I will share with you separately in the coming weeks. Several studies that are talking about a permanent state of peace between Israel and Palestine, what it means economically, and what the sort of reconstruction, not only of Gaza, but of the economy as a coherent national economy, geographically, spatially, functionally. So thanks for bringing that up at the end of this very, we ranged over a number of topics, but we're all in the midst of war. So we're not thinking of those longer term. We don't feel we have the luxury, let's say, but I think it's kept in a number of discussions today. It kept coming up, the tension between the immediate and the need to think of the immediate at least in a medium term that has rights for Palestine at the end of that.
Great.
Thank you. But anyhow, I wanted to
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Saed. Hats off to all those who are resilient and stayed all day. You are actually challenging yourself to stay till the end of the conference. That's actually good to see you still here in the hall. We're talking about green infrastructure and green buildings. There was a 4 years ago, there was a conference about green buildings. Did they start building green buildings, or did it just regress or fall apart? The second issue in terms of crowdiness, in the evening or even at noon, if you go out, there's not even any air to breathe. When can you breathe? It would be around dawn, after you pray the Fajr prayer. It's around 4 a.m. It's the best time for you to go out to walk and think and not see anyone and just do some sports. But after 8 or 9, it's all traffic and people are screaming at each other, yelling at each other just to cross the street. So the Israelis are actually suffocating us. We even have people who are from the Golan Heights. They study at the Hebrew University and they come to live in Ramallah. Ramallah is being overcrowded, and there are villages that do not have any youth. There's one of the villages in Nablus. We asked them, where are the youth? They said there's 1,000 youth in this village. They're living in Ramallah and Al-Bira, and they're married there. So we're asking, there's only elderly here. Where are the youth? They said they're all in Ramallah. Overcrowdedness is affecting the sewage, the water, the electricity, and all the services. So this also needs some kind of solution. Are there any comments or any other input? Dr. Rabih, would you like to comment, your final comments?
I would like to thank you, Jeffrey, for your interesting.
He's speaking English.
It's a luxury sometimes to talk about renewable energy and the green economy and this catastrophe and genocide in Palestine. But it's one of the main topics that was included before. There was like 4 or 5 topics that heavily discussed the impact of war in different perspectives. So you came to the end by renewable energy, by a green economy, which is in the table of Palestinian decision maker and the private sector in the last 15 years, and it's one of the main solution for, the interrelation between us and the Israeli side, mainly in energy sector. So, but thank you very much for your interesting comments. بالنسبة للأبنية الخضراء.
As for the green buildings, to respond to your question, there are some initiatives that were conducted, but they are mostly either public or private sectors. So there are lots of the buildings with, for example, I see at the university, I'm not trying to give credit to the university, but many of the buildings are mainly dependent on solar energy, and they have taken in several practices. Even in the Gaza Strip prior to the war, a large portion of it, about 15 to 20% of the sources of energy was from natural sources such as UNRWA schools, public schools, and public institutions in Gaza were endorsing these policies. So it's there, and it was taken on as expansion. However, in terms of transfer and clearance with the electricity companies, these are also part of the challenges in line with the legal framework that we have. We know that it's the end of the day and you're all like tired and bombarded from the massive information you've received. On behalf of Raja, I thank you all. And on behalf of MAS and the board of directors, I thank you all. Professor Sachs, do you have any final remarks before we conclude?
No, just that I'd be very happy to follow up on any and all issues. Of course, you can always count on me if I can be helpful in any way.
Thank you so much. That is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We extend our gratitude to everyone attending for their valuable participation in this conference or symposium. We hope that you have benefited from all the discussions. We also thank all the panelists for enriching the narrative. We hope to see you next time, and best of health to everyone. Take care.